My name is Xavier Mitchell. I'm 24 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was working on my master's degree in agricultural science at the University of Kentucky. I had a normal life, classes during the day, research in the evenings, occasional drinks with friends on weekends. Now I wake up screaming most nights, and I've moved back in with my parents in Louisville. My therapist suggested I write down what happened as a way to process the trauma. I don't think it will help, but I've got nothing left to lose. It started in late September when I took a research assistant position at the Lexington Agricultural Research Station, about 15 miles outside the main campus. The facility sits on over 600 acres of farmland, with experimental crop fields, a small forest for ecological studies, and several research buildings scattered across the property. My advisor, Dr. Harmon, had secured funding for a soil degradation study that required soil samples to be collected at various times throughout the day and night to measure fluctuations in microbial activity. The job meant I'd be staying in one of the small cabins on the property for 3 months. The pay was good, and it would give me uninterrupted time to work on my thesis. Plus, I've always enjoyed solitude. The irony isn't lost on me now. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The research station was unusually quiet. Budget cuts had reduced the staff to a skeleton crew, and most of the other seasonal researchers wouldn't arrive until spring. My cabin was at the edge of the property, about a quarter-mile from the main lab building and half a mile from the nearest neighbor, another small cabin occupied by the station's caretaker, an older man named Frank Delaney. The first week passed uneventfully. I'd wake up early, collect soil samples from designated locations, run tests in the lab, and repeat the process at noon, sunset, and midnight. Between collections, I'd analyze data, read research papers, or hike around the property. The midnight collections were eerie but peaceful, just me, a flashlight, and the sounds of insects and distant coyotes. On my 8th night, I noticed something odd during my midnight collection. The usual chorus of crickets and frogs had gone silent. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe a fox or raccoon had passed through recently. But as I knelt to collect a sample from the edge of the cornfield, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. The silence was absolute now. Even the breeze seemed to have stopped. I turned my flashlight toward the tree line about 50 yards away, half expecting to see a deer or some other nocturnal animal. What I saw instead made my blood freeze. 2 reflective eyes, much higher off the ground than any coyote or deer, glowed in the darkness between the trees. They were pale yellow and they were unmistakably watching me. I've been in the woods my whole life. I've encountered coyotes, bobcats, even a black bear once when camping in eastern Kentucky. This was different. Those eyes were too intelligent, too focused, and they were at least 7 feet off the ground. I backed away slowly, keeping my flashlight trained on the spot. The eyes blinked once, then disappeared. I hurried back to my cabin, locked the door, and tried to convince myself it was just a deer standing on a hill, or my imagination playing tricks in the darkness. The next morning, I mentioned it to Frank when I ran into him at the main lab. "Probably just a deer," he said, not looking up from his coffee. "Though we have had some livestock go missing from farms to the north. County's got a bounty out for a mountain lion they think might have wandered in from the Daniel Boone forest." "These eyes were too high for a mountain lion," I said, "and too big." Frank gave me an odd look. "Well, whatever it was, best stick to the clearings after dark. And maybe carry something more than just that little penlight." He offered me an old hunting knife, which I accepted more out of politeness than any belief I'd needed. I slipped it into my field kit and tried to focus on my work. 3 nights passed without incident. I started to relax, convincing myself I'd seen nothing more than a deer on a ridge. Then came Sunday night. I was at my furthest collection point, almost at the northern boundary of the property. A sudden gust of wind blew through the tall grass, creating a whispering sound that made me jump. When I stood up, soil sample in hand, I noticed the silence again. No insects, no distant traffic from the highway. Nothing. Then I heard it. A low rumbling growl that didn't sound like any animal I recognized. It wasn't a coyote or a bobcat. It was deeper, almost like a tiger at the zoo, but wrong somehow, distorted. I swept my flashlight in a wide arc but saw nothing. The growl came again, this time from a different direction. Whatever it was moving fast, circling me. I abandoned the rest of my samples and started walking quickly toward the cabin. The moonlight cast long shadows across the field, and every rustle of the corn made me flinch. The growling had stopped, but the silence was almost worse. When I reached the edge of the field, I broke into a run. That's when I heard it behind me. Not growling this time, but something worse. The sound of heavy footfalls, too quick to be human, too heavy to be a deer. Something was chasing me. I didn't look back. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly ahead of me. The footsteps grew closer. I could hear panting now, harsh and hungry. I reached the gravel path that led to my cabin and risked a glance back. What I saw in the flashlight's beam still haunts me. It was only for a split second, but the image is burned into my memory. A massive shape, running on all fours, but all wrong. The proportions weren't like any animal I'd ever seen. It had the general shape of a wolf, but was the size of a bear, with a distorted, almost human-like chest, and forelimbs that seemed too long, too articulated. Its fur was patchy and mangy, revealing sickly gray skin underneath. And its face, God, its face. The muzzle was too short, filled with jagged teeth that didn't fit right in its mouth. Its eyes reflected my flashlight with that same pale yellow glow I'd seen days earlier. When it saw me looking, it made a sound that wasn't a growl or a howl, more like a laugh garbled through a throat not meant for such sounds. I dropped my sample kit and sprinted the last 100 yards to my cabin. I fumbled with the keys, certain at any moment I'd feel those teeth closing on my neck. I got inside, slammed the door, and locked it, then pushed my desk in front of it for good measure. Nothing came. No scratching at the door, no growling outside the windows, just silence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my back against the wall opposite the door, the hunting knife in one hand and my phone in the other. I had no signal. The research station was in a notorious dead zone, so I couldn't call anyone. The landline was in the main lab, a quarter-mile walk that might as well have been 100 miles. When dawn finally came, I was still sitting there, stiff and exhausted. I waited another hour until the sun was fully up, then moved the desk and peered outside. Nothing. Just the peaceful research station in the morning light. I walked to where I dropped my sample kit. It was there, but the samples were scattered across the path, the containers smashed. Around them were tracks, large canine prints, but deeply pressed into the hard-packed dirt, suggesting something far heavier than a coyote or even a wolf. Some of the prints looked almost hand-like. I went to the main lab intending to call my advisor and make up some excuse to leave. But when I got there, I found Frank sprawled on the floor of his office, face gray, clutching his left arm. "Heart attack," he gasped when he saw me. "Called ambulance. No reception. In your cabin." I found the landline and confirmed the ambulance was on its way. Then I helped Frank into a more comfortable position and waited with him. "Did you see anything last night?" he asked between labored breaths. I hesitated, then nodded. Something was out there. Something big. It chased me. Frank closed his eyes. "Thought it was just stories. Old-timers in town talk about something in these fields. Been happening for generations. Disappearances, livestock mutilations. They call it the Lexington lurker." "What is it?" I asked. "Don't know. Don't want to know." He winced in pain. "But it's been more active lately. Started after they broke ground for that new development north of here. Disturbed something." The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. As they loaded Frank in, one of the paramedics told me he'd probably be okay. They'd caught the heart attack early. Then they were gone, and I was alone at the research station. I should have left then, packed my things and driven away. But I didn't, partly because I needed this position for my degree, partly because I'd convinced myself that what I'd seen was some kind of mountain lion or escaped exotic pet, and partly because I'm embarrassed to admit it now. I was curious. I decided to continue my work, but to limit my collection times to daylight hours. I'd just have to explain the gap in the midnight data to Dr. Harmon later. That afternoon, I drove into town for supplies and to get a break from the isolation of the research station. Lexington is a decent-sized city, and being around normal people in a grocery store helped ground me. On impulse, I stopped at a hunting supply store and bought a powerful flashlight, some pepper spray, and a trail camera. When I returned to the station, I set up the trail camera, facing the spot where I'd seen the creature emerge from the trees. Then I went about my evening routine, finishing my last collection at sunset. As night fell, I locked myself in my cabin again, but this time I kept the lights off and sat by the window watching. Hours passed with nothing but normal nighttime sounds. Distant traffic, the occasional owl, the constant background noise of insects. Around 1 a.m., the insects went silent again. I tensed, scanning the darkness outside my window. At first, I saw nothing. Then a movement caught my eye. Something large crossing the open area between the lab building and the forest edge. Even in the dim moonlight, I could tell it was the same creature. It moved with an awkward gait, sometimes on all fours, sometimes rising to a hunched bipedal stance that made my skin crawl. It paused once, lifting its head as if scenting the air, then continued toward the cornfield where I'd collected samples earlier. I watched until it disappeared from view, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it could hear me from 100 yards away. The next morning, I checked the trail camera. To my disappointment, but not my surprise, the memory card showed nothing but empty forest. Either the creature hadn't passed in front of it, or the camera had failed somehow. I was removing the camera when I noticed something on a nearby tree. Claw marks about 7 feet up the trunk, deep grooves in the bark that no natural Kentucky wildlife could have made. That's when I heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. A moment later, an old blue pickup truck pulled up, and Frank's nephew Robert got out. He was a burly man in his 30s, with the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. "You must be Xavier," he said. "Uncle Frank asked me to check on the place while he's in the hospital. Said you might want some company." I was surprised and relieved. "How is he?" "Stable. Doctors think he'll make a full recovery, but he'll be laid up for a few weeks." Robert glanced around. "Place looks quiet." "It is during the day," I said, then immediately regretted it. Robert gave me a sharp look. "Problems at night?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. I told him what I'd seen, half expecting him to laugh or think I was crazy. Instead, he nodded grimly. "Uncle Frank called me from the hospital, told me about your encounter. That's the real reason he sent me. This thing has been around for years, but it usually stays deep in the forest, only coming out when it's desperate or when someone disturbs its territory. You believe me? You've seen it too?" Robert shook his head. "Not personally, but my dad did, back in the 80s, and his dad before him. It's something of a local secret. Most folks who've been here generations know the stories, but we don't talk about it with outsiders." He looked at me apologetically. "No offense, none taken, but what is it?" "Some say it's a mutated wolf from when they used to test experimental pesticides here in the 50s. Others think it's something older. My granddad used to say it was a man who'd made a deal with the devil and got turned into a beast as punishment." Robert shrugged. "All I know is it's dangerous and best avoided." "Shouldn't we report it? Call animal control or something?" Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think they'd believe us? Besides, people have tried over the years. Game wardens, hunters, even a cryptozoologist once. They never find anything, and then they leave, and whoever called them in usually has an accident within the week." A chill ran through me. "Are you saying it's intelligent? That it targets people specifically?" "I'm not saying anything for sure, just telling you what I've heard." He looked around at the lengthening afternoon shadows. "I'll be staying in the staff housing by the main lab. You're welcome to move into one of the other cabins there too. Safer with 2 of us together." I took him up on his offer, moving my essential belongings to a cabin 2 doors down from Robert's. That night, we sat on the porch of the main lab building, each of us with a shotgun Robert had brought. He'd given me a crash course in handling it, though I prayed I wouldn't need to use it. "If you see it, aim for the center mass," he advised. "Don't try for a headshot like in the movies. And if you hit it, don't wait around to see if it's dead. Run. Get inside. These shells will hurt it, maybe slow it down, but I wouldn't count on them stopping it. Has anyone ever killed it? Robert took a swig from his thermos of coffee. Story goes that my great-grandfather shot something matching its description back in the 30s, emptied his rifle into it, said it fell off a cliff into the river. Everyone thought it was dead. He shrugged. Obviously, if it was the same creature, they were wrong. We fell silent, watching the darkness. Around midnight, we heard it, a long, mournful sound that started like a wolf's howl, but twisted halfway through into something that raised the hair on my arms. It was distant, coming from the northern edge of the property. "That's it," Robert whispered. "It's hunting." We listened as the howl faded. Then another sound reached us, the faint, panicked barking of dogs from the direction of the nearest farm, about a mile north of the research station. Robert stood. "We should go inside." We retreated to the lab building, locking the doors behind us. Through the windows, we watched the tree line, but nothing emerged. Eventually, the barking stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. In the morning, Robert drove into town to get supplies. While he was gone, I received a call from Dr. Harmon on the lab's landline. "How's the research coming, Xavier?" he asked after pleasantries. "Good," I lied, though I've had to modify the collection schedule due to some wildlife concerns. Wildlife? Nothing dangerous, I hope. "Just being cautious," I said. "There might be a predator in the area. I've been avoiding night collections." Dr. Harmon was silent for a moment. "That's disappointing. The midnight samples are crucial for establishing the diurnal microbial fluctuation patterns. But safety first, of course." Another pause. "You know, if you're uncomfortable out there alone, I can send another graduate student to assist you." "I'm not alone," I said. "The caretaker's nephew is here." "Robert Delaney?" Dr. Harmon's voice took on an odd tone. "Interesting. I wasn't aware Frank had contacted him." After we hung up, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease about the conversation. Dr. Harmon had seemed overly concerned about the midnight samples and strangely interested in Robert's presence. When Robert returned, I mentioned the call. "Harmon," he muttered, "never trusted that guy. He's been pushing to expand the research station, develop more of the land. Some of us think he's got a financial stake in that new development to the north." That afternoon, we checked the news and discovered that a farmer north of the research station had reported 3 sheep killed during the night. The article described the deaths as consistent with coyote attacks, but Robert and I exchanged knowing looks. As dusk approached, Robert suggested we set a trap. Not to catch the creature, he was clear that would be suicidal, but to get evidence of its existence. "Motion-activated cameras around the perimeter of the compound," he explained, "and blood bait to draw it in." "Blood bait?" I asked, not liking the sound of that. "Butcher's blood. I picked some up in town." He showed me a large plastic container. "We'll soak some rags in it, place them about 100 yards out from the buildings. Far enough that it shouldn't draw the thing right to us, but close enough that the cameras might catch it." I wasn't entirely comfortable with the plan, but I helped him set up the cameras in the bait stations. By nightfall, we were back in the lab building, watching the feeds from the cameras on a laptop. Hours passed with nothing but occasional small animals, investigating the bait: raccoons, opossums, once a fox. Then around 2 a.m., all the wildlife suddenly vanished from the feeds. "It's coming," Robert whispered. The camera at the northernmost bait station went dark, then the next one and the next in sequence moving toward the lab. "It's destroying the cameras," I said, my mouth dry. "Smart?" Robert muttered. "Too smart." The final camera, the one closest to the lab, about 50 yards from the building, showed a large dark shape approaching the bait. It moved into frame, but the image was too dark and grainy to make out details. Then the shape seemed to look directly at the camera. A second later, that feed went dark too. We sat in tense silence, listening. After a few minutes, Robert spoke in a low voice. "I'm going to check the south-facing window. Keep watching the door." He moved quietly across the room. I kept my eyes fixed on the lab's main entrance. Shotgun ready. "Jesus Christ," Robert hissed from behind me. I turned to see him backing away from the window, his face pale in the dim light of the laptop screen. "It's right outside. It's watching us." I moved to the window, keeping to the side to avoid being silhouetted. At first, I saw nothing in the darkness. Then a subtle movement caught my eye. A darker shadow among the shadows beneath a large oak tree, about 30 yards from the building. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the hulking shape, standing unnaturally still. It wasn't moving, wasn't trying to get in. It was just watching. "What do we do?" I whispered. "Nothing." "We wait. If it wanted to get in, it would have tried by now. I think it's just curious." "About what?" "About why we're trying to document it." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. The implication that the creature had that level of understanding, that it recognized our intentions, it was too disturbing to contemplate. We watched for what felt like hours, neither of us willing to move away from the window. Eventually, the shape beneath the tree seemed to melt back into the darkness. Shortly after, the insect sounds resumed outside, indicating the creature had left the area. Neither of us slept the rest of the night. When dawn came, we inspected the cameras. All 5 had been destroyed, their casings crushed and the electronics inside mangled. It wasn't the work of an animal knocking them over or even smashing them in a frenzy. They had been methodically destroyed, the memory cards removed and taken. "It knows what cameras are," I said, holding the twisted remains of one device. "How is that possible?" Robert didn't answer directly. "We need to contact someone outside. This is getting too dangerous." We returned to the lab to use the landline, but the line was dead. Robert's cell phone had no signal, just like mine. "We could drive into town," I suggested. Robert nodded. "Let's grab some supplies first. I don't think we should come back here." We walked to our cabins to pack. As I was stuffing clothes into my duffel bag, I heard a vehicle approaching. Looking out the window, I saw Dr. Harmon's SUV pulling up to the main lab building. I met Robert outside and we walked over to greet Dr. Harmon, who was removing equipment cases from his vehicle. "Dr. Harmon," I called. "We weren't expecting you." He turned, smiling. "Xavier, good to see you. I thought I'd come out and help with the midnight collection since you've been having concerns." Something in his tone made me uneasy. Robert tensed beside me. "Actually," I said, "we were just leaving. There's been some dangerous wildlife activity and—" "Nonsense," Dr. Harmon cut me off. "This is an important study. We can't abandon it over some unfounded fears." His dismissive attitude sparked anger in me. Unfounded? Something destroyed 5 trail cameras last night. Something that understands what cameras are and how they work. Dr. Harmon's smile faltered slightly. "Coyotes can be surprisingly destructive when attracted by bait." "It wasn't a coyote," Robert interjected. "And you know it." Dr. Harmon's expression changed, hardening. "Mr. Delaney, always interfering in university business. Your uncle at least knows his place." "What's that supposed to mean?" Robert demanded. "It means," Dr. Harmon said coldly, "that this research station has been operating under certain understandings for decades. Your family has been compensated well for your discretion." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You know about the creature? The university knows," Dr. Harmon sighed. "Not officially, no, but some of us have been aware of the station's unique inhabitant for many years. We maintain a respectful distance, and it generally does the same." "Respectful distance?" Robert's voice rose. "It killed 3 sheep last night. It's stalking the compound, and you're talking about it like it's some kind of protected species." "In a way it is, Doctor," Harmon replied. "Or at least a research subject of immense value. Think about it. A creature that has evaded scientific classification, that displays near-human intelligence. The potential for study is unprecedented." "Study?" I was incredulous. "Have you seen it up close? It's not some undiscovered species. It's something wrong, unnatural." Dr. Harmon's eyes narrowed. "Unnatural is a meaningless term in biology. Everything in nature, no matter how unusual, has an explanation." "Is that what happened to the previous research assistants?" Robert asked suddenly. "The ones who quit unexpectedly or transferred to different projects. Were they getting too close to your research subject?" A cold feeling spread through my chest as I remembered the graduate student who had occupied my position the previous year. A woman who had abruptly left the program mid-semester for personal reasons. Dr. Harmon didn't answer directly. The research station operates under a delicate balance. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for the advancement of science. You're insane, I said, backing away. We're leaving. Now. I'm afraid I can't allow that, Dr. Harmon replied, reaching into his jacket. Robert moved faster than I would have thought possible, tackling Dr. Harmon before he could withdraw whatever he was reaching for. They crashed to the ground, struggling. I heard the metallic sound of something skittering across the gravel. A tranquilizer gun, I realized with shock. "Run!" Robert shouted, pinning Dr. Harmon. "Get to my truck!" I hesitated, not wanting to leave him. "Go!" he yelled. "I'll be right behind you." I ran to Robert's truck, fumbling with the door handle. To my relief, it was unlocked, the keys in the ignition, typical for rural Kentucky. I started the engine just as Robert came sprinting around the corner of the building. He jumped into the passenger seat, and I floored it, the truck fishtailing on the gravel before gaining traction. "He's crazy," Robert panted. "Said they've been studying that thing for years, using research assistants as bait to observe its hunting patterns." "Did you stop him?" I asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Knocked him out cold, but he'll wake up soon enough." We drove in tense silence, following the winding road that led away from the research station. About 2 miles down, we rounded a curve and found a large tree blocking the road, freshly fallen, its leaves still green. "That's not right," Robert muttered as I brought the truck to a stop. "There was no storm last night." We got out to inspect the tree. The break wasn't natural. The trunk had been partially cut through with what looked like claw marks, then pushed over to block the road. "It knew we'd try to leave this way," Robert said, his voice hollow. A low growl from the woods to our right made us both freeze. Slowly we turned. The creature stood at the edge of the trees, no longer hiding in shadow. In the clear daylight, it was even more nightmarish than my glimpses had suggested. It stood on 2 legs, its body a grotesque hybrid of wolf and human, covered in patchy gray fur that exposed diseased-looking skin in places. Its proportions were all wrong: arms too long, torso too broad, legs bent at unnatural angles. Its face was the worst part, a wolf's muzzle but flatter, with human-like eyes set too close together, glowing with malevolent intelligence. It made that strange laughing sound again, revealing yellow teeth that didn't fit properly in its mouth. "Back to the truck," Robert whispered. Slowly, we began backing away. The creature watched us, head tilted in an almost curious manner. It made no move to attack, but somehow that was more terrifying, like it was savoring our fear. We reached the truck and got in, keeping our eyes on the creature. I started the engine, then threw the truck into reverse, intending to back all the way to the research station if necessary. As we began to move, the creature suddenly dropped to all 4s in charge, covering the distance with shocking speed. It slammed into the front of the truck, powerful enough to rock the vehicle. Then it began tearing at the hood, metal screeching as its claws punctured and peeled back the steel like aluminum foil. Robert grabbed his shotgun and lowered the window. "Drive!" he shouted, leaning out to fire. The blast hit the creature in the shoulder. It reared back, roaring, a sound no natural animal could make, a blend of wolf's howl and human scream. I shifted into drive and swerved around it, bumping over the edge of the road to avoid the fallen tree. The truck tilted alarmingly, 2 wheels dropping into the ditch, but I kept my foot on the gas, and we lurched forward, scraping past the obstacle. Through the back window, I could see the creature recovering, shaking off the shotgun blast as if it were a minor irritation. It began to pursue us, running in that disturbing half-bipedal, half-quadrupedal gait, closing the distance rapidly. "Faster!" Robert urged, reloading the shotgun. I pushed the old truck to its limits, the engine roaring. We gained some ground on the creature, but I could still see it in the rearview mirror, relentless in its pursuit. The truck was damaged from the attack, the temperature gauge rising, a warning light flashing on the dashboard. We weren't going to make it all the way to town. "Head for the Wilson farm," Robert said, pointing to an upcoming turnoff. "It's just half a mile down that road. They might be able to help." I made the turn, the truck protesting with a grinding noise from under the hood. The creature followed, now about 100 yards behind us. We reached the farmhouse, a large white 2-story with a broad front porch. An older man was outside working on a tractor. He looked up in surprise as we skidded to a stop in his yard. "Wilson!" Robert shouted, leaping from the truck. "We need help! It's coming!" Wilson's eyes widened as he recognized Robert, then narrowed as he looked past us to the road. Without a word, he hurried to the house, emerging moments later with a rifle. "Get inside," he ordered, tossing Robert a box of ammunition. "Martha," he called to the house, "get the safe room ready." An older woman appeared at the door, took one look at the situation, and disappeared back inside. Robert and I ran for the house as Wilson took up a position by the tractor, rifle raised. Inside, Martha ushered us through the kitchen to a heavy door that led to what looked like a storm cellar. But unlike any storm cellar I'd seen, this one had walls reinforced with metal, multiple locks on the door, and no windows. "Hurry," she urged, pushing us inside. "James will be right behind us." We entered the reinforced room. It was well stocked with supplies, food, water, first aid equipment, and notably, several more weapons. "You know about the creature," I said. "It wasn't a question," Martha nodded grimly. "Every family that's been in this area for generations knows. We're prepared." She looked toward the door anxiously. James should have been right behind us. Just then, we heard a gunshot from outside, followed by that unnatural roar. Another shot, then silence. Martha moved to shut the door, but Robert stopped her. "Wait, James is still out there. If he doesn't come in the next 10 seconds, we have to close it," she said, her face tight with fear and resignation. Those were the rules we agreed on. We waited, counting silently. At 9, the door to the kitchen burst open. Wilson stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash across his chest. "It's here," he gasped. "Close it, now!" Robert and I pulled him into the safe room as Martha swung the heavy door shut. The locking mechanisms engaged with a series of metallic clicks. Wilson collapsed onto a cot. Martha immediately began treating his wound, which, though bloody, didn't appear life-threatening. "Caught me with its claws," Wilson explained through gritted teeth. "I got 2 shots off, hit it both times, but it didn't even slow down." We sat in tense silence listening. At first, there was nothing. Then we heard it. Heavy footsteps moving through the house above us, followed by the sound of furniture being overturned, glass breaking. "It's searching for us," Martha whispered. The destruction continued for several minutes, then stopped. Silence fell, broken only by our breathing and Wilson's occasional pained exhalation. "Is it gone?" I asked after what felt like an eternity. No one answered. We all knew better than to assume. The silence stretched until suddenly a heavy impact shook the door of the safe room. Then another, and another. The creature was trying to break through. "It can't get in," Martha assured us, though her voice trembled. "This room was built to withstand tornadoes. The door is steel, 3 inches thick." The pounding continued, then stopped. A low growling came from the other side, followed by what sounded almost like words. A garbled, guttural attempt at speech that made my skin crawl. "It's never done that before," Wilson said, struggling to sit up. "Never heard it try to talk." Another silence, longer this time, then a new sound, scraping, like metal on metal. It took me a moment to realize what was happening. "The locks," I whispered in horror. "It's trying to manipulate the locks." Martha moved to a cabinet and retrieved a handgun. "This has been in my family for 3 generations," she said, checking that it was loaded. "The bullets are silver, blessed by a priest in 1923. I don't know if that makes any difference, but my grandfather swore it was the only thing that ever made the creature retreat." The scraping at the lock stopped. Another silence, then a sound that chilled my blood. A light chuckle, all too human, from the other side of the door. Footsteps retreated, and then we heard nothing more. We waited in that safe room for hours, no one willing to risk opening the door. Wilson's wound had been cleaned and bandaged, but he'd lost blood and was feverish. Martha sat beside him, whispering reassurances while keeping her silver-loaded pistol ready. "We need to get him to a hospital," Robert finally said. "Not until we're sure it's gone," Martha replied firmly. "This isn't the first time we've waited it out." I checked my phone again. Still no signal. "Does your landline work?" I asked. Martha shook her head. "It tore out the phone lines. It always does." A shiver ran through me at the implication. This wasn't random destruction. The creature knew exactly how to isolate its prey. "How long do these sieges usually last?" I asked. "A day, sometimes two," Wilson answered weakly. "It gets bored eventually." But something told me this time was different. The creature's behavior had escalated. The destroyed cameras, the blocked road, its attempt to mimic human speech. It was learning, adapting. As night fell, we took turns watching while others tried to rest. Around midnight, during my watch, I heard it return. Not pounding this time, just a soft scratching at the door, almost gentle, like someone politely asking to be let in. I woke Robert, and we listened together as the scratching continued intermittently for nearly an hour. Then came that guttural attempt at speech again, closer to actual words this time. "Kakuma." "Ah, Jesus," Robert whispered. "It's talking." "That's not possible," Martha insisted, though her face had gone pale. The voice came again. "Xavier." My blood froze. It knew my name. "Resurrec importante." Robert and I exchanged horrified glances. The words, though distorted, were unmistakable. An imitation of Dr. Harmon's speech patterns. "You don't think—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know," Robert replied, his voice hollow. "Maybe it's just mimicking. Or maybe—" The alternative was too terrible to contemplate, that the creature had somehow absorbed information from Dr. Harmon, that it had consumed him. The voice fell silent, but we could still hear movement outside the door, a heavy breathing that came and went. It was waiting, patient now, confident in its eventual victory. Dawn came according to our watches, though we had no way to tell in the windowless room. The creature hadn't made any sounds for several hours. Wilson's condition had worsened overnight. His wound was infected, the skin around it discolored and hot to the touch. "We need to risk it," Martha said finally. "He needs antibiotics, or he'll lose the arm, maybe worse." Robert nodded. "I'll go. The truck's damaged, but if I can get to your car—" "Keys are in the kitchen drawer," Martha told him. "But you can't go alone." "I'll go with him," I volunteered, though every instinct screamed against it. We prepared as best we could. Martha gave me her silver-loaded pistol, keeping a regular handgun for herself. Robert had his shotgun. We gathered makeshift armor, heavy leather jackets, work gloves, motorcycle helmets from the Wilsons' collection of emergency gear. "If it's still out there," Martha warned, "don't try to fight. Just run, different directions. It can only chase one of you." Cold comfort, but practical advice. We agreed that Robert would make for the car while I created a diversion if necessary. If either of us made it to town, we'd send back help. Martha disengaged the locks, her hands steady despite everything. "Ready?" We nodded, weapons raised. She pulled the door open. The basement beyond was dark and quiet. We stepped out cautiously, listening for any sound. Nothing. We moved up the stairs to the kitchen, which was demolished. Cabinets torn from walls, refrigerator overturned, floor covered in broken glass and scattered food. Still no sign of the creature. Robert found the car keys while I kept watch at the window. The farmyard appeared empty in the morning light. No movement except birds returning to their normal routines. "I think it's gone," I whispered. "Don't be so sure," Robert replied. "Let's move. Stay alert." We crept through the ruined house to the front door. Outside, the damage continued. Wilson's tractor was overturned, our truck's hood torn completely off, exposing the mangled engine beneath. But the Wilson sedan sat untouched in the driveway. Too untouched. I had a sudden, terrible suspicion. "Wait!" I grabbed Robert's arm. "It's too easy." He looked at me, then at the car, understanding dawning on his face. "You think it's a trap?" Before I could answer, we heard a soft thump from behind the sedan. Then another. Footsteps circling around to the far side of the car. "Back inside," Robert whispered urgently. "Go!" We turned to retreat, but a growl from the porch stopped us cold. The creature stood there, blocking our path to the house, its misshapen body silhouetted against the morning sun. It must have been on the roof, waiting. "Split up!" Robert hissed. "Now!" He fired his shotgun at the creature and sprinted left toward the barn. I ran right toward a fenced pasture. hearing the creature's roar behind me. A quick glance back showed it leaping from the porch, not after me, but after Robert. I hesitated, torn between continuing to safety and trying to help. The pistol felt heavy in my hand, useless as Robert's shotgun had proven, but maybe the silver bullets. I turned and ran after them, my heart pounding. I rounded the barn just in time to see the creature corner Robert against the far wall. It was toying with him, moving slowly now, savoring his fear. "Hey!" I shouted, raising the pistol. The creature turned and I fired. The bullet hit it in the chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it screamed, not a roar this time, but a high, piercing sound of genuine pain. Where the bullet had struck, smoke rose from the wound, the flesh around it blackening. The silver worked. The creature looked down at its chest, then back at me, its yellow eyes narrowing with what could only be described as hatred. It charged. I fired again, striking its shoulder. Another scream, another smoking wound, but it kept coming. Robert used the distraction to break away, running to my side. "The car!" he shouted. "Now!" We ran together toward the sedan. I risked one more shot over my shoulder, hearing a yelp of pain that told me I'd hit something. The keys were already in Robert's hand, and we dove into the car, slamming the doors shut just as the creature reached us. It crashed against the driver's side, claws scrabbling at the window. The glass held, but hairline cracks spread across its surface. Robert started the engine and threw the car into reverse, backing away rapidly. The creature pursued, running alongside, smashing at the windows repeatedly. A spiderweb of cracks spread across the glass, but it hadn't broken yet. Robert spun the wheel, turning the car toward the long driveway that led to the main road. "Shoot it again!" he yelled over the engine's roar. I rolled down my window just enough to extend the pistol and fired at the creature running alongside us. The bullet grazed its neck, causing it to fall back momentarily. Robert floored the accelerator, and we shot forward down the driveway, gaining distance. In the rearview mirror, I could see the creature standing in the middle of the farmyard, watching us escape. It made no attempt to follow. Instead, it lifted its distorted head and made that unnatural howling sound. A warning, a promise that this wasn't over. We reached the main road and sped toward town, neither of us speaking until the farm was well out of sight. "The silver hurts it," Robert finally said. "Really hurts it." "Martha said the bullets were blessed," I replied. "Maybe that part matters too." He nodded. "Maybe, but we can't go back for Wilson and Martha without more firepower." We reached Lexington proper in 20 minutes, driving straight to the county sheriff's office. The deputy at the front desk looked up in surprise as we burst in, disheveled and wild-eyed. "We need help," Robert said urgently. "There's an attack at the Wilson farm. James Wilson is injured. His wife is trapped." "Attack?" the deputy asked, standing. "What kind of attack?" Robert and I exchanged glances. How to explain? "Some kind of animal," I said. "Large, like a wolf, but bigger. It's already injured one person severely." The deputy's expression changed, a flash of something, recognition, in his eyes. "The Wilson place, you said?" "Out by the research station." We nodded. "I'll radio it in." He stepped away to use his radio, speaking too quietly for us to hear. When he returned, his manner had changed subtly. "Help is on the way. Why don't you two wait here? The sheriff will want to take your statements." Something about his tone made me uneasy. I glanced at Robert and saw the same suspicion in his eyes. "Actually," Robert said, "we need to get to the hospital. My friend here is injured." He gestured to the scratches on my arm from crawling through broken glass in the Wilsons' kitchen. The deputy blocked our path to the door. "I'm afraid I must insist. The sheriff will be here shortly." I tensed, ready to push past him if necessary, when the door opened behind us. A tall, gray-haired man in a sheriff's uniform entered, his weathered face grave. "Robert Delaney," he said, nodding to Robert. "Been a while." "Sheriff Tanner," Robert replied cautiously. "These two say there's been an animal attack at the Wilson place," the deputy informed him. Sheriff Tanner studied us both, his expression unreadable. "An animal attack, is that right?" Something in his tone made me speak up. "You know it's not just an animal. You know what's out there." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. Son, I don't know what you think you saw. Cut the bullshit, Robert interrupted. James Wilson is dying, and Martha is trapped in their safe room. Are you going to help, or do we need to call the state police? The mention of the safe room changed something in the sheriff's demeanor. He sighed heavily. Deputy Collins, get the special response team assembled and call Doc Mercer. Tell him we've got a code silver situation. The deputy's eyes widened, but he nodded and hurried to comply. You two, come with me, the sheriff ordered, leading us to a private office. Once the door was closed, he turned to us. What exactly did you see? And did you engage with it? We told him everything, from my first glimpse of the creature at the research station to our escape from the Wilson farm. When we mentioned Dr. Harmon, the sheriff's expression darkened. Damn fool, he muttered. We had an understanding. The university stays away from that part of the forest, especially during active periods. You knew about this thing all along, I accused. People have died, and you've covered it up. Boy, you don't understand what you're dealing with, the sheriff replied sharply. This isn't some problem you can solve with enough firepower and good intentions. This is something that's been in these parts since before there was a Lexington. My grandfather was sheriff before me, and his father before him, all the way back to when this was just frontier land. Every generation has had to learn how to live with it. By sacrificing people? Robert demanded. By maintaining a balance, the sheriff corrected. It doesn't hunt in town, it stays in its territory. Sometimes livestock goes missing, sometimes a hiker who ignored the warning signs doesn't come back. It's a steep price, but the alternative? What alternative? I asked. The last real attempt to kill it was in 1923. A group of men, led by the sheriff at that time, went into the forest with silver bullets and torches. They wounded it badly and thought they'd succeeded. His expression grew grim. Over the next month, 17 people disappeared from their homes in the night, children taken from their beds. The creature had never come into town before that. It was sending a message. A chill ran through me. So you just live with it? Let it take people occasionally? We have an arrangement, the sheriff said. It stays in the deep forest, away from the town and farms. In return, we leave it alone. The university's research station was part of the buffer zone, a place where there would be limited human activity, strictly controlled. But lately, people have been pushing boundaries. That new development to the north is cutting into its territory, and now your professor was encouraging it to hunt research assistants. We shot it, Robert said. The silver bullets hurt it. I know, the sheriff nodded. That's why I called in a code silver. We've maintained a response team for generations, just in case. Silver rounds, specialized training. But we only engage as a last resort. The goal is containment, not elimination. And the Wilsons, I asked, we'll extract them. Their farm is in the buffer zone, but they've always understood the risks. The safe room has kept them alive this long. An hour later, we were in a convoy heading back to the Wilson farm, 3 sheriff's SUVs, an ambulance, and us in the back of the sheriff's vehicle. The response team was grim-faced and heavily armed, their weapons looking more specialized than standard police issue. The farm was quiet when we arrived, no sign of the creature. A team approached the house cautiously while the rest established a perimeter. Within minutes, they'd reached the safe room and extracted Martha and Wilson. The latter immediately transferred to the waiting ambulance. As the ambulance departed with a police escort, the sheriff approached us. It's gone for now, but it'll be back, especially after being wounded. We'll post deputies here for a few days, but this place isn't safe anymore. The Wilsons knew that. This was their 3rd encounter in 20 years. What about the research station, I asked. Officially, it'll be closed due to structural issues. The university will relocate your project. He fixed me with a stern look. I suggest you take the opportunity to transfer to a different institution altogether, Mr. Mitchell, for your own safety. And Dr. Harmon? The sheriff's expression hardened. We'll handle Dr. Harmon. His violation of the arrangement won't go unanswered. I never returned to the research station. Robert drove me back to campus that day, where I packed my belongings and checked into a hotel. 3 days later, I withdrew from the university entirely, citing personal reasons. My advisor tried to convince me to stay, suggesting alternative research projects, but my mind was made up. Dr. Harmon was reported missing the same week. The official story was that he'd gone hiking in the Daniel Boone National Forest and failed to return. Search parties found nothing. The university held a memorial service a month later, which I did not attend. Wilson recovered from his injuries, though he and Martha moved to Florida shortly after. Their farm sold to the university to expand the research station's buffer zone, according to the news. I moved back to Louisville, to my parents' house, trying to piece my life back together. Nightmares plagued my sleep, yellow eyes watching from shadows, the sound of claws on metal doors, that distorted attempt at human speech calling my name. Sometimes I think about what the sheriff said, about the creature being there since before Lexington existed, about the balance maintained through generations of silence and occasional sacrifice. I wonder what would happen if the story got out, if people learned what lurks in the forests outside their city. But then I remember the intelligence in those yellow eyes, the way it disabled the cameras, the way it knew to block the road, to target the phone lines, the way it learned to speak. And I wonder if it's watching me even now, waiting to silence yet another witness who knows too much. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. The research continues. Some sacrifices are necessary for science. Below that, a crude drawing of a wolf's head with 2 human eyes. I burned the letter, but I can't burn the knowledge of what's out there. All I can do is stay away from Lexington and pray that the ancient arrangement holds, that the creature remains confined to its territory, and the people tasked with maintaining the balance never falter. Because if that balance ever truly breaks, what happened at the research station will seem like nothing compared to what would follow. I keep Martha Wilson's silver-loaded pistol under my pillow now, just in case. Because deep down, I know the truth. Once you've been marked by the Werewolf of Lexington, you're never truly safe again.